The front door slammed behind us with such force that the windows rattled. I stood frozen on the porch, a black trash bag clutched in my white-knuckled grip, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Beside me, my 15-year-old brother Danny stood perfectly still, his own bag hanging limp at his side, his face drained of color. "Don't you dare come back here!" Our stepfather Rick's voice boomed through the door. "You're 18 now, Maya. You're not my problem anymore. And since you want to act like his mother so bad, you can take care of him too." The porch light flicked off, plunging us into darkness. It was November in Denver, and the cold cut through my thin jacket like broken glass. Danny's breath came out in shaky clouds, his shoulders beginning to tremble. I wanted to scream, to pound on that door until my fists bled, to demand an explanation that made sense. But I knew there wasn't one. Rick had been looking for an excuse to get rid of us since our mom died 2 years ago, and my 18th birthday had given him exactly what he needed. "Maya?" Danny's voice cracked. "What do we do?" I looked down at him, tall for his age, but still so young, still believing that adults had answers. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to swallow the fear. "We figure it out," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Come on." We walked down the familiar sidewalk of the neighborhood where we'd grown up, past houses lit with warm yellow light, past families sitting down to dinner, past lives that felt impossibly distant from ours. My feet carried us automatically to the one thing that was technically ours, the 1998 Dodge Caravan that had been our mom's before she got sick. It sat at the far end of the street, where Rick had banished it months ago, the passenger window held together with duct tape, the rear bumper secured with wire. I pulled the creaky door open, and we climbed inside. The interior smelled like mildew and old fast food. Danny immediately curled up in the back seat, pulling his jacket tight around himself. I sat in the driver's seat and turned the key, whispering a prayer I didn't really believe in. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught with a rattling wheeze. At least that was something. "Are we really going to sleep here?" Danny asked quietly. I looked at my phone. 11% battery. I'd scrolled through my contacts 3 times already, but the truth was brutally simple. We had no one. Mom had been an only child. Our grandparents were gone, and the few friends I had were living in college dorms or their parents' houses, places that couldn't absorb 2 homeless teenagers. I'd dropped out of high school 6 months ago to work full-time when Rick cut off money for food. That decision, which had seemed necessary then, now left me with a GED, $347 in my checking account, and a minimum wage job at a coffee shop that gave me 23 hours a week. "Just for tonight," I lied. "Tomorrow we'll figure something out." I drove us to a Walmart parking lot on the east side of town, where I'd heard people sometimes slept in their vehicles. We parked in the back corner, away from the lights. I divided the trash bags between us, using our clothes as makeshift blankets and pillows. The van's broken heater meant we'd be facing the cold with nothing but layers and body heat. That first night, I didn't sleep at all. I listened to Danny's breathing eventually slow and deepen, watched the condensation form on the windows, and felt the full weight of responsibility settle onto my shoulders like cement. I was 18 years old, and I was now solely responsible for keeping my brother alive. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange over the Rocky Mountains in the distance, I shook Danny awake. His face was puffy from crying at some point in the night, though he'd tried to hide it from me. "We need a plan," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I've got work at 11. You're going to have to come with me." "What about school?" he asked. The question hung in the air. School meant attendance records, meant counselors asking questions, meant eventually someone noticing that 2 kids were living in a van. I made a decision that would haunt me later, but felt necessary in that moment. "Call in sick today. We'll figure out the school thing soon, but right now we need to focus on surviving." We used the Walmart bathroom to wash up as best we could, brushing our teeth in the sink while early morning shoppers gave us pitying looks. I changed into my coffee shop uniform in a stall, stuffing my dirty clothes back into the trash bag. Danny sat in the van reading while I worked my shift, and when I came out at 6:30 that evening with a bag of day-old pastries my manager let me take, I found him shivering despite wearing every shirt he owned. This became our routine. I worked my shifts while Danny hid in libraries or the van. We ate dollar menu items and day-old bread. We showered at the rec center when we could scrape together the day pass fee. We learned which parking lots were safe and which ones had security that would knock on the window at 3 in the morning and tell us to move along. We learned to recognize the other van dwellers by the condensation on their windows, the curtains made from bedsheets, the exhausted faces behind the glass. December arrived with a vengeance, bringing temperatures that dropped into the teens at night. I bought a sleeping bag from a thrift store for Danny and told him to keep it wrapped around himself at all times. My own nights were spent dozing in the front seat, waking every hour to check that he was still breathing, that he hadn't succumbed to hypothermia while I slept. One morning, about 3 weeks into our new reality, I woke to find Danny already up, sitting cross-legged in the back of the van with the rear doors open. Spread around him were pieces of an old radio that someone had thrown in a dumpster behind the electronics store. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the cold. "Fixing it," he said simply. "Dad taught me, remember? Before he left." I did remember. Our biological father had been an electrician before he walked out when Danny was 6. He'd spent hours showing Danny how things worked, how circuits connected, how to diagnose problems. It was one of the few good memories we had of him. "Does it work?" I asked. Danny connected the last wire and turned it on. Static crackled. Then a country music station came through clear and strong. He grinned, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "I bet I could sell this," he said. "People buy fixed-up stuff online all the time." The idea hit me like electricity. I scrambled for my phone, searching Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. Vintage radios, refurbished electronics, upcycled furniture. There was an entire market for things that people had thrown away and someone else had restored. And we had unlimited access to dumpsters, time we were already spending in parking lots, and Danny's unexpected skill. "How much stuff do you think you could fix?" I asked slowly. He looked around the van at our meager possessions, then back at the radio. "I don't know. A lot, maybe, if we had tools and parts." That night, I broke into our emergency fund, the money I'd been hoarding for the security deposit on an apartment we couldn't afford yet, and bought a basic toolkit from Harbor Freight. $43 that felt like a fortune slipping through my fingers. But when I handed it to Danny, the light that came into his eyes made it worth every penny. The transformation didn't happen overnight. That first week, Danny brought home 7 items from various dumpsters: 3 radios, a broken lamp, 2 picture frames, and a DVD player. He worked on them during the day while I was at work, teaching himself from YouTube videos he watched at the library. By Friday, he'd fixed 5 of them. I created accounts on every selling platform I could find, photographing the items with my phone in the best natural light I could manage. The pictures were mediocre at best, taken in a Walmart parking lot with a trash bag visible in the background of one shot. But I wrote detailed descriptions, emphasized the vintage appeal, and priced them reasonably. The first sale came 2 days later. A woman from Highlands Ranch drove 40 minutes to meet us in a Target parking lot to buy the restored radio for $35. I watched Danny hand it over, saw the pride in his face when she complimented his work, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. By the end of December, we'd made $218 from Danny's repairs. It wasn't enough to change our situation dramatically, but it was enough to buy better food, to get Danny a winter coat that actually fit, to put gas in the van without panic. More importantly, it gave us purpose beyond just surviving. "I've been thinking," Danny said one night as we sat in the van eating Chinese takeout from the dollar menu. "There's a lot more we could fix if we had better tools. Like, I saw a whole toaster oven behind Best Buy, but I couldn't do anything with it because I don't have a soldering iron." I'd been thinking too. My coffee shop job was dead-end, the hours inconsistent, the pay barely covering our basic needs. But what if I could find items too? What if this became more than just Danny's hobby? The next day was my day off. Instead of job hunting like I'd planned, I took Danny dumpster diving. We started behind the Goodwill, where donated items that were too damaged to sell got thrown out. We found a wooden chair with a broken leg, a mirror with a cracked frame, a set of dishes missing only 2 pieces. "The chair's an easy fix," Danny said, examining it. "And people buy mismatched dish sets all the time for weddings and stuff." We moved on to strip malls, apartment complexes, anywhere people threw things away. Behind a furniture store, we hit gold. A solid wood dresser with water damage on the top, but otherwise perfect structure. It took both of us to wrestle it into the van, and we got strange looks from shoppers, but we didn't care. That dresser became our first major project. I watched YouTube videos about furniture restoration while Danny worked on electronics. I bought sandpaper and wood stain with our profits. For 5 days, I sanded that dresser in the parking lot, working until my arms ached and my hands blistered. Danny painted the drawers in a contrasting color. He mixed himself from clearance paints at Home Depot. We listed it for $150. I expected to negotiate down, to maybe get $90 if we were lucky. It sold in 6 hours for full price to an interior designer who wanted it for a client's nursery. She asked if we had more pieces. We could, I told her, trying to keep my voice professional despite my racing heart. What are you looking for? She gave me her card and a list of specifications. Mid-century modern, farmhouse chic, industrial, terms I had to Google later. But she was offering real money for custom restoration work. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was opportunity. January brought bitter cold and unexpected growth. We developed a system. I'd scout for furniture and larger items during the day. Danny would handle electronics and small repairs, and we'd both work on furniture restoration in the evenings. The van became our mobile workshop. Tools organized in plastic bins, supplies stacked in every available space. We were still homeless, still sleeping in parking lots, still showering at the rec center, but we were making money, real money. Some weeks we cleared $300 after expenses. I opened a separate savings account and watched the balance slowly climb. $200, $500, $800. The physical toll was brutal. My back ached from hunching over furniture in the cold. Danny's hands were covered in small cuts and burns from his electrical work. We were exhausted all the time, surviving on caffeine and adrenaline. But for the first time since that night on the porch, I felt like we had control over our lives. In February, something shifted. A local vintage shop owner named Marcus approached us at a flea market where we were selling our pieces. He was in his 60s, with kind eyes and grease-stained hands that reminded me of someone who actually understood hard work. "You kids make this stuff?" he asked, examining a table we'd restored. "Yes, sir," Danny said. Marcus walked around the table slowly, testing its stability, checking the finish. "It's good work, real good. You learn this from your folks?" "Taught ourselves," I said. "YouTube mostly." He laughed, a warm sound. "YouTube. Hell, I wish we had that when I was starting out." He pulled out a business card. "I've got a shop in Rhino. Been looking for someone who can do custom restoration work. You interested?" It turned out Marcus owned a successful vintage furniture business and was getting more orders than he could handle. He offered us a deal. He'd provide the pieces that needed restoration, we'd do the work, and we'd split the profit 60-40, 60 for us. He'd also give us access to his workshop on weekends so we could work in a real space with proper tools. "Why would you do that?" I asked, suspicious of generosity. Marcus looked at us, really looked at us, and I knew he saw the van, the trash bag of clothes, the exhaustion we tried to hide. Because I was 19 once, sleeping in my car, thinking I'd never make it out. Someone gave me a shot, figured I'd pass it on. We took the deal. That weekend, walking into Marcus's heated workshop with actual workbenches and professional tools felt like stepping into a dream. Danny immediately gravitated toward the electrical equipment while I ran my hands over a belt sander I'd only ever seen in videos. "You can use anything here," Marcus said. "Just clean up after yourselves and don't burn the place down." For the next 3 months, we worked like machines. I quit the coffee shop to focus full-time on restoration. We'd spend weekdays scouting for items and doing minor repairs in the van, then weekends at Marcus's workshop tackling bigger projects. The money started coming in faster. Some weeks we'd clear $600 or $700. Our savings account grew. 1,000, 2,000, 3. But we were still living in the van. I'd lie awake at night doing math, trying to figure out when we'd have enough for first month, last month, and security deposit on an apartment. In Denver's housing market, that meant at least $4,000, maybe more. We were close, so close. Then in May, disaster struck. I woke up one morning to find the van wouldn't start, not the usual reluctant cough and eventual catch. Complete silence. Danny and I sat there in the dead vehicle, and I felt panic rising in my chest. "How much would it cost to fix?" Danny asked quietly. I'd been ignoring the check engine light for months, putting off oil changes, pretending the weird sounds were normal. Now the van that had been our home, our transport, our workshop, was just an expensive piece of metal we couldn't afford to repair or replace. I called Marcus, explained the situation. He sent a tow truck and told us to come to the shop. When we arrived, he was waiting with a thermos of coffee and serious expression. "The van's done," he said bluntly. "Transmission's shot, engines on its last legs. Would cost more to fix than it's worth." I felt the ground drop out from under me. We don't have anywhere. You can stay in the apartment above the shop," Marcus interrupted. "It's small, just one room and a bathroom, but it's heated and it's got running water. Rent's $300 a month." I stared at him. "Why would you do this?" He shrugged. "Because you kids work harder than anyone I've ever seen. Because you've got something real here, and I don't want to see you lose it over a broken transmission. And because—" He paused, his voice softening. "Because I know what it's like to be young and terrified and convinced the whole world's against you. Sometimes one person believing in you makes all the difference." That night, Danny and I moved into the apartment above Marcus's shop. It wasn't much, just a studio with a hot plate, a bathroom with a shower that only had 2 temperatures, freezing and scalding, and windows that rattled in the wind. But it was warm. It was safe. It was ours. The apartment became our command center. We kept our overhead low, living on rice, beans, and whatever day-old bread the bakery down the street sold for $1. Every penny we made went back into the business or into savings. By July, we had $6,000 in the bank and a steady stream of orders from Marcus and our own clients. Danny turned 16 that month, and I bought him a real present for the first time since we'd been kicked out, a professional soldering station he'd been eyeing. He cried when he opened it, trying to hide his face, mumbling something about it being too expensive. But watching him use it that weekend, creating repairs that were cleaner and faster than ever before, I knew it was worth it. "We should make this official," Danny said one evening as we worked side by side, me refinishing a coffee table while he rebuilt a vintage amplifier. Like an actual business, with a name and everything. I'd been thinking the same thing. We had regular clients now, a reputation growing by word of mouth. People were starting to seek us out specifically, asking for those siblings who fix anything. "What would we call it?" I asked. Danny thought for a moment. "What about second chance restoration? Everything we fix gets a second chance, like us." The name stuck. I filed the paperwork to make us an official LLC, using Marcus's shop as our business address. It cost $200 and felt terrifying and exciting in equal measure. At 18 and 16, we were business owners. August brought our first major opportunity. An interior designer who'd bought several pieces from us recommended us to a developer who was renovating a historic hotel in downtown Denver. They needed 40 pieces of furniture restored to 1920 specifications: chairs, tables, dressers, mirrors, lighting fixtures. The contract was worth $18,000. I read the number 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This was more money than we'd made in the entire past 8 months combined. It was also more work, with a tighter deadline, than we'd ever attempted. "Can we do it?" Danny asked, reading the contract over my shoulder. I thought about the van, the parking lots, the nights I'd wondered if we'd make it to morning. I thought about every piece of furniture we'd restored, every skill we'd taught ourselves, every impossible thing we'd already done. "Yeah," I said, "we can do it." We hired our first employee, a guy named Jesse who'd been living in his car and selling scrap metal. Danny had met him at a dumpster behind an electronics store, both of them digging for parts. Jesse was 23, had some experience with woodworking, and was willing to work for cheap plus a cut of the profits. Marcus let us expand into more of his warehouse space. For the next 2 months, we worked 16-hour days. I became obsessed with period-accurate restoration techniques, spending hours researching 1920s furniture styles and finishes. Danny took on all the electrical work for the lighting fixtures, while supervising Jesse on the simpler furniture repairs. We turned Marcus's warehouse into an assembly line, each of us specializing in our strengths. The deadline was October 15th. On October 12th, we finished the last piece, a stunning oak wardrobe with Art Deco inlay that had taken me a week to restore properly. We loaded everything into a rented truck and delivered it ourselves, barely sleeping, running on pure adrenaline. The developer walked through the hotel lobby, examining each piece with a critical eye. My heart hammered. If he rejected the work, we'd used up our savings on materials and labor. We'd be back to square one, maybe worse. Finally, he turned to us with a smile. "This is exceptional work. Better than I expected, honestly. When can you start on the second building?" There was a second building, a sister property that needed 60 more pieces. He wanted to hire us exclusively as his restoration team for all future projects. He handed me a check for $18,000 and a contract for the next job worth $30,000. I stared at the check until the numbers blurred. This was real. We were really doing this. That night, Danny, Jesse, Marcus, and I celebrated at a cheap Mexican restaurant, splitting a pitcher of Coke and too many orders of chips and salsa. Jesse talked about finally being able to rent an apartment. Marcus told stories about his early days in business. Danny was quiet, but I could see the pride radiating off him. I never thought we'd make it this far, Danny said quietly, as we walked back to our apartment later. We're not done yet, I replied. This is just the beginning. By November, we'd outgrown Marcus's space. We found a small warehouse in an industrial area near Globeville, 1,500 square feet of concrete and possibility. The rent was steep, $2,000 a month, but we could afford it now. We hired 2 more people, bought professional equipment, and officially became a real operation. The work kept coming. We built a website, started a social media presence, got featured in a local design blog. Second Chance Restoration became known for high-quality work, fast turnarounds, and the unique story of 2 siblings who'd built a business from nothing. I turned 19 that December. We celebrated by signing the lease on a real apartment, not the studio above Marcus's shop, but a 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood where Danny could have his own space. It had a dishwasher and a washer-dryer and windows that didn't rattle. Moving in felt surreal, like stepping into a life that belonged to someone else. Christmas Day, our first in our own apartment, Danny gave me a framed photo of the van, the broken-down Dodge Caravan that had been our home for those brutal months. Beneath it, he'd mounted our first business card and the receipt from our first sale. So we never forget where we came from, he said. I hung it in the living room, and sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it, remembering the cold, the fear, the absolute certainty that we'd never make it out. We'd proven everyone wrong. Rick, the people who'd crossed the street to avoid us, the world that had written us off as hopeless teenagers. We'd taken nothing and built something extraordinary. By February, Second Chance Restoration had 8 employees and a 6-month wait list. We'd restored furniture for restaurants, hotels, corporate offices, and private collections. Our revenue for the year would top $200,000. We'd gone from homeless teenagers sleeping in a van to business owners with a growing company. But success brought its own complications. The more visible we became, the more our story spread. A local news station wanted to do a feature on us. A business podcast requested an interview. And with that attention came the inevitable question, what about your family? I'd avoided thinking about Rick for almost 2 years. He existed in my mind as a dark shape, a source of pain I'd locked away to deal with later. But later was arriving whether I wanted it to or not. The call came on a Wednesday in March, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Maya, it's Rick. My entire body went rigid. Beside me at the workshop table, Danny looked up, sensing something wrong. How did you get this number? I asked, my voice cold. I saw you on the news. The story about your business. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to say to each other. Please. His voice cracked. Just give me 10 minutes. There's something you need to know. Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, to block the number, to erase him from existence. But something in his tone, desperation, maybe, or genuine regret, made me hesitate. 10 minutes, I said. The coffee shop on Colfax. Tomorrow at 2. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking so badly I had to set down the sanding block I'd been holding. Who was that? Danny asked quietly. Rick wants to meet. Danny's face went through several emotions. Shock, anger, fear. Why? I don't know. But I'm going to find out. The coffee shop was neutral territory, public enough to feel safe but quiet enough to talk. I arrived 15 minutes early and positioned myself where I could see the door. When Rick walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd aged dramatically, thinner, grayer, with a defeated slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before. He spotted me and approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. Thank you for seeing me. You have 10 minutes, I said, not offering him a seat. He sat anyway, hands wrapped around a coffee cup he'd bought at the counter. For a long moment, he just stared into it, and I watched him struggle to find words. I'm sick, he finally said. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They're giving me maybe 6 months. I waited for the satisfaction, the sense of cosmic justice. It didn't come. Instead, I just felt hollow. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it more than I expected to. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he continued, about your mom, about how I handled things after she died, he took a shaky breath, about what I did to you and Danny. You threw us out, I said flatly, in November, with nothing. I know, his voice broke. I know what I did, and I've been living with it for 2 years, telling myself I had reasons, that you were 18 and legally an adult, that I couldn't afford. He stopped, shook his head. They were all lies. The truth is I was drowning in grief and anger, and I took it out on you kids. You reminded me of her too much. Every time I looked at you, I saw her dying, and I couldn't handle it. The explanation was better than I had expected, but still inadequate. Do you know what happened to us? Do you know we were homeless for months? That Danny missed almost a year of school? That there were nights I wasn't sure we'd survive until morning? I saw the news story, he said quietly. I saw what you built. I'm proud of you, Maya. Both of you. Don't. The word came out sharp. You don't get to be proud. You weren't there. You're right. I wasn't. And I can't undo that. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. But I can try to make one thing right. I didn't touch it. What is that? The house. I'm signing it over to you and Danny. It's paid off. Your mom made sure of that before she died. There's also about $40,000 in her life insurance that I never touched. It's yours. It was always supposed to be yours. But I was so angry and hurt that I convinced myself I deserved it for raising you. I stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why now? Because I'm dying and I'm terrified of what comes next. Because I don't want to leave this world knowing I destroyed 2 kids' lives out of selfishness. Because, his eyes filled with tears, because your mother would never forgive me, and I need to believe that maybe, someday you might. I picked up the envelope, felt its weight. Inside was potentially the final piece of security that Danny and I had been building toward, but it came wrapped in so much pain, so much history. I need to think about this, I said. Take all the time you need. My lawyer has copies of everything. Whether you forgive me or not, whether you ever speak to me again or not, it's yours. It's the least I owe you. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, your mom would be incredibly proud of what you've become, both of you. You're the best parts of her. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with an envelope and 1,000 conflicting emotions. I didn't go back to the workshop. Instead, I drove to the cemetery where our mom was buried, something I hadn't done since the week after her funeral. Her headstone was simple. Beloved mother, taken too soon. I sat in the grass in front of it and told her everything. About the van, the business, Rick's illness, the impossible choice he'd laid at my feet. I don't know what to do, I said to the stone, to the memory, to the woman who'd taught me that family was everything. Part of me wants to take the money and tell him to go to hell. Part of me thinks you'd want me to forgive him. What would you do? The wind rustled through the trees, carrying no answers. That night I showed Danny the envelope. We sat in our apartment, our real apartment with its dishwasher and non-rattling windows, and looked at the documents together. The house deed, transfer paperwork, insurance information. It was all legitimate. What do you think? I asked him. Danny was quiet for a long time, his fingers tracing the papers. I think Mom wouldn't want us to carry around hate. It's too heavy. We've already carried enough. So we forgive him? I don't know about forgive. But maybe we accept this and let go of needing anything else from him. We built something amazing without him. We don't need his approval or his apology, but we can take what he's offering without it meaning we owe him anything. My little brother, somehow wiser than me. When did you get so smart? Had a good teacher, he said with a small smile. We signed the papers. The house would be ours, and we decided to rent it out, using the income to fund a scholarship program for homeless teenagers trying to finish high school. The insurance money went into a trust for Danny's college education and to expand Second Chance Restoration. I met with Rick one more time before he got too sick. Not to offer forgiveness exactly, but to tell him what we'd decided to do with his gift. You're better people than I ever was, he said. We're just trying to be the people Mom raised us to be, I replied. He died in July, and Danny and I attended the funeral. We didn't cry, didn't give a eulogy, but we were there. It felt like the right thing to do, even if it was complicated. By the time I turned 20, Second Chance Restoration had 15 employees and had opened a second location. We'd restored furniture for some of Denver's most prestigious hotels and restaurants. We'd been featured in national design magazines and had a waiting list that stretched into the next year. But more importantly, we'd created something beyond just a business. We hired people who were struggling, the homeless, the previously incarcerated, people who needed a second chance the way we had. We paid fair wages, offered health insurance, created pathways to ownership for our best workers. Jesse now ran our second location. 3 of our employees had gone on to start their own restoration businesses using skills they learned with us. We'd also partnered with local homeless shelters to provide job training, and we'd started that scholarship program using the rental income from our childhood home. Every year, we helped 5 teenagers finish their education and learn a trade. Some of them came to work for us. Some went on to college. All of them got the chance we'd almost been denied. One Saturday morning, Danny and I stood in front of our main warehouse, looking at the sign we'd just had installed. Second Chance Restoration, founded 2023. Below it, in smaller letters, in memory of Sarah Chen, who taught us that family isn't always about blood, it's about who shows up. You think she'd be proud? Danny asked. I thought about our mom, about the strength she'd shown fighting cancer, about the love she'd poured into us even when she was dying. I thought about the girl who'd sat on a porch at 18 with nothing but a trash bag and a terrified brother, certain the world had ended. I thought about the woman I'd become, the business we'd built, the lives we'd changed. Yeah, I said. I think she'd be proud. A beat-up Toyota pulled into the lot, and a teenage girl got out, looking nervous. She was clutching a piece of paper with our address on it, probably from the shelter program. Another kid looking for a second chance. You ready? I asked Danny. He nodded, and together we walked over to greet her, ready to offer the same opportunity someone had once offered us, ready to prove once again that the end of one story is just the beginning of another. The van was long gone, sold for scrap metal years ago, but sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd look at the framed photo in our living room and remember those brutal, freezing nights that had forged us into who we'd become. We hadn't just survived. We'd taken our worst moment and transformed it into our greatest strength. And that, more than any amount of money or success, was the real victory.